everybody. Good afternoon. I thank you all for coming today. We'll just get started. This is OUR Education Series. Topic is Summer Program for Undergraduate Research, SPUR Application Workshop. So just as a reminder to everybody, this is a virtual event. It is being recorded, so please mute yourself and turn off your camera to ensure optimal experience. If you have any questions, use the chat feature or unmute when you are invited to do so by the speaker. So event evaluation, for those of you that are Europe, Early Exploration, or Wilk Scholars, and you want to receive credit for attending this event, please complete this event evaluation. So just as a reminder, the mission of the Office of Undergraduate Research, the mission of the University of Utah Office of Undergraduate Research is to facilitate and promote undergraduate student-faculty collaborative research and creative works in all disciplines throughout the University of Utah campus. We acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. And so today we have many people from the OUR team joining us today. I will allow everybody to introduce themselves, but just so you know, my name is Angie Leiva. I'm an academic program coordinator, and you've probably seen my name a lot concerning SPUR, and so I will allow Dr. Fukushima to introduce herself next.
Hello, folks. We are so excited to have your interest in the Office of Undergraduate Research Summer Program for Undergraduate Research Program. So thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Fukushima. I am the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies, and I have the honor of running the Office of Undergraduate Research with members of my team, including Angie and others who will introduce themselves.
Hey guys, my name is Bradley. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Office of Undergraduate Research. I'm excited to be here today with you guys to learn a little bit more about these SPUR applications.
And my name is Nopper. I'm an undergraduate research leader, specifically a STEM specialist and also pre-award specialist for the office. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing the summer program for undergraduate research, otherwise known as SPUR. So I'm going to give you kind of a short presentation on some information about SPUR before we go into breakout rooms and get more personalized help. So about SPUR, SPUR is the summer program for undergraduate research. It is a nationally competitive 10-week summer research experience that is under the mentorship of a University of Utah faculty member. And this program provides opportunities to gain research experience in a variety of disciplines that we offer. So some general program information. So the program runs between May 19th and August 1st, 2025. So this upcoming summer, you will be hired as a temporary employee by OUR and receive a $5,000 stipend that is going to be equally dispersed throughout the duration of the program. All participants will have access to University of Utah ID cards, which will provide you access to free public transportation and also our university libraries. Non-University of Utah participants that are relocating to Utah for the duration of the program may also be eligible to receive a travel reimbursement up to $500 for round-trip travel. So some of the student expectations for participating in SPUR is 35 to 40 hours a week on research and other program-related activities. So some of these activities can include biweekly meetings, some of our program events such as orientation, the opening luncheon, our education series events, and also the grad school mini expo that we offer. Summer socials are not required events, but are strongly encouraged to get to know some of your peers and also some other faculty members at the U. You will also need to present at the Undergraduate Research Symposium, otherwise known as URS, at the end of the program, and also have the opportunities to submit to our undergraduate research journal known as RANGE. So for eligibility, you must be a matriculated degree-seeking undergraduate student in the fall 2024 semester. So this is beginning or continuing your college career in fall 2024 and not graduating before December 2025. Concurrent enrollment while in high school does not meet this eligibility requirement. Applicants, since we said it was a nationally competitive program, as you know, applicants do not need to be a University of Utah student, but you must be at least 18 years old by May 19th, 2025, which is preferred overall, but it is required for the on-campus housing option. Also, if your status prevents you from working in the US, feel free to please contact Angie for any questions. And if you are an international student, you must be degree seeking undergraduate student at the U or possess documentation for work eligibility in the US. International students must also consult with their institution's international office before applying to the SPUR. So some quick application requirements. So these are some of the requirements that we have for the SPUR application. It starts with contact information, general academic information, and then we go into our personal statement, the choice of your top 3 projects, your resume or CV, transcripts, and also 2 letters of recommendation. So here's some tips for your application. We're going to go through them kind of loosely before we go into the breakout rooms. So for your personal statement, basically you want to answer the question in approximately 500 words or less. You're trying to answer these following questions. First of all, why are you applying? Why are you passionate about research if you've done it before? What do you want to get out of SPUR? How will it help you in the future? And kind of how it aligns with some of your academic and personal goals. You want to be able to highlight some of your relevant experiences that you would bring to the project. If you've never done research before, that's perfectly fine, but make sure you have some sort of relevant experience where you can include some of the specific skills that you have that's related to the project and how you would help aid that project. So these skills can include training or certificates, past job experience. And then you also want to highlight some of your personality traits that make you a good researcher, such as leadership, passion, and also resilience. And finally, the most important thing is to make it unique to you and show why you're passionate about the projects, why you're passionate about going to SPUR and conducting undergraduate research. So for letters of recommendation, like I previously mentioned, you will need 2 letters. These are preferably written by faculty members who can attest to your suitability for research, some of your classroom performance, and also motivation for research. So you can have them discuss any past research experience you have, and feel free to provide them with any talking points, such as the skills, past assignments, or remind them of some projects you've completed if it is a professor. And you can also ask your letter writer to highlight your strengths as an individual. You can use this experience to, first of all, get your letters of recommendation. Second, most importantly, is to foster strong relationships with professors, which are skills that you're going to need for most of your life in research. So the deadline for applications, deadline to submit application and letters of recommendation is January 26, 2025 at 11 p.m. Mountain Time, 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to Angie. Okay, so we have a couple questions that were previously submitted when you registered for this event. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. And then after that, we're going to break out into our breakout rooms and have more personalized questions answered about all the components of the application. So the first question that was put was is the international student allowed to apply for this program? So yes, like I mentioned, international students are fully eligible to apply, and you have to reach out to Angie for any questions or concerns as long as you meet some of the requirements that were listed previously in the presentation. The second question that was put was, how many summer programs should you apply for? So for SPUR, you're only able to select 3 project choices, so your top 3 project choices. However, you are able to apply to as many other research opportunities as you would like, both within Utah or at the U or other institutions. So we have a bunch of opportunities on our website. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask any of us about some of the other opportunities we offer for the summer. The next question is, can I apply if I don't attend Utah University? Yes, SPUR is open to all degree-seeking matriculated undergraduate students in the U.S. It is nationally competitive, so you do not have to apply, or you do not have to attend any Utah University. However, some projects, such as the Reach U2 and the Happiest projects, those do require additional eligibility requirements, and those can be found on the specific SPUR project page and their application. So make sure you look out for that because there are a few projects that do require that additional eligibility. And someone said, just to confirm, can each letter of recommendation only be sent once our application has been fully submitted? So no, you can send the email request to your letter writers before you submit your application. In the info ready application, when you're providing the contact information, there's a button that will say send a reference letter request. And so you can click on that and that'll automatically send an email to whoever you wanted to have as your letter of recommendation writer. And lastly, we have what research opportunities are available for the summer. So I kind of already went into this, but if you have any further questions, feel free to ask any of us. So other than SPUR, we do have UROP, which is the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. So that is open for the summer semester as well. And then we have the Wilkes Scholar also in the summer, which is specifically for climate and environmental based research. And that is also in the fall and spring, both of those programs. So if you're interested in participating in the summer, the application for deadline for both of those is March 7th. So you have a little more time than SPUR, which is due again at January 26th at 11:59 p.m. And if you want to apply for other summer programs, there is the option to be considered for the other programs in the SPUR application as well. You just need to select which programs you're interested in. And yeah, now we can, if there's any more questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. And if not, we can go and get more personalized help in the breakout rooms.
Yes, if anyone has any questions about generally program overview, structure, anything like that, we can answer them right now before we go into breakout room sessions. So at this point, you can feel like Allie mentioned, put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. Also, if you don't feel comfortable asking your question right now, just know that, there is opportunities to ask during breakout room sessions, and there's also opportunities to meet one-on-one with an OUR staff member and undergraduate research leader like Allie to book a research advising appointment.
Angie, there's a question from Delta. If you want to go ahead and just read that question, there's some responses, but if you want to summarize the responses, I think it just might be helpful for folks in case if they missed the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so our question is from Delta is, I am struggling to write a competitive personal statement as I am not experienced English writer. I can't speak right now. What do you suggest and how do I stand out? So yeah, that is a great question. Like I said, we can answer that more personally in the breakout room sessions. But Dr. Fukushima has also given some feedback on that. And her suggestion is you should have your university writing center review your application materials and give you feedback. Some of the research projects may require you to do writing. And so your writing skills would have to be, you'd be pretty comfortable with that. And so you'd have to do reports, papers, you will have to do a research poster at the end of the summer. That is a requirement for all SPUR participants. And so you should definitely take all of this into consideration and figure out, how comfortable you are and also what type of support you would need in order to, be successful in this project. And so we do have another question. Do you have an estimate of how competitive the program typically is? That's a great question. So to give you guys an idea, last year we had 650 students apply and we had 53 students that we were able to support in the summer. So generally we accept about 10% of the students.
8%.
8%. Thank you for that. Thank you for that correction. About 8% of all the students that apply. And so as you can imagine, that applicant pool is pretty big. It is pretty robust. It is very competitive. However, you should definitely don't let that deter you from applying. There are lots of ways that you can, make yourself stand out. And we'll go over that in the personal statement rooms, letters of recommendation. There's lots of tips that we can give you to, make your application as competitive as possible.
There's more questions. So then the other
sorry.
question is about ASL accommodations. And so just so you know, the University of Utah does have an ADA office that supports people who are employed by the University of Utah with any accommodations they may have. And so just so you know, if you are somebody who also needs it right now, you can use the caption feature in Zoom as well. So just as a reminder for that is please utilize the features available to you. This event is recorded and made available as well afterwards.
If there are no other questions, you guys are so gung-ho and excited to go into the breakout rooms, we can totally do that. I'll just give you guys a little bit of guidance on how this is going to work. And I'll actually go back to the presentation so we can all look at this really quickly. Okay, so we are going to have 3 rooms. And so the first room will be personal statements, and that will be facilitated by Dr. Fukushima. Our second breakout room will be resumes, CVs, letters of recommendation. That will be facilitated by myself and Bradley. And then we will have Allie, who will be in our main room. She will be answering any general questions. And just as a reminder to everybody, you are not, you to any room you need to move around to. You are not stuck to any room. So if you feel like you want to start off in room 1, and then as soon as you feel comfortable, your question was answered, you can move on to the next room. And so we'll be doing that shortly. But if anyone does have you need additional assistance, maybe you don't feel comfortable asking your question right now, just know that you can book a research advising appointment. Myself and Allie, if you follow that link, we are listed as like SPUR specific appointment you would like to make. Those are only with myself and Allie. But if any member of the OUR staff is totally able to help you answer any questions you have. We also have other undergraduate research leaders like Allie that can also assist. So you can book an appointment. You can also join us for Funding Fridays as well.
Funding Fridays, you can bring your application materials to Funding Fridays to get support from a staff and peer. And so just as folks, you might be wondering, what is a Funding Friday? Funding Friday is an opportunity, drop in time that happens every Friday. Bradley, when is Funding Fridays again? Can you just remind us all?
Funding Friday is every Friday from 1 to 3 p.m.
Yeah, so you can hang out with Bradley. And who else is helping you, Bradley? Do you want to give a shout out to?
Allie is helping me, so she'll be there, and one of our other undergraduate leaders, Isabella, will be there, and then another staff member. It'll vary by week.
Yeah, so you've got lots of support if you want to also bring your materials to Funding Fridays. Otherwise, as Angie's conveyed, you can make a drop-in time with research advising, which I plopped in some of those links. Angie may have already done it, and I just missed it earlier. But it doesn't hurt to have more links in a Zoom room.
Breakout room 1 is personal statements with Dr. Fukushima.
All right, folks. So I'm just going to go ahead and wonderful. I'm glad you're here. I have a sample that I'm going to share with you, but we also can talk through some of the specific questions you might have about your personal statements. But I'm going to go ahead. I know that you received some general insights into what makes a strong personal statement. I just want to confirm that everyone can see my screen. And we're just going to look at some examples just so you have a sense of what makes for a strong research personal statement, right? Here, applying for a summer program. And so I'm going to just go ahead and read this aloud, and you can also read it as well visually. But you'll see here in the opening, the person says, sitting in silence, I asked myself if I had made the right decision. Could I really leave what I had dedicated my life to? Nevertheless, my soul was filled with an overwhelming sense of peace for the first time in years. Leaving the pre-med world behind, I decided to enter the fascinating world of research. Really nice opening, kind of pulls you in more narrative style. Up to you if you're not a poet or a creative writer, you may feel like you might want to just get to the punchline. It's really up to you. And so some of the things that you see here is that this person is talking about their interests, right? And their goals. They talk about then later on, they say, upon graduating, I will pursue a PhD in this particular field. Right? They highlight some of the things that they believe this program will give them that they're super excited by, right? And then they start to talk about their experience. So we're going to look at this paragraph here. It says, I currently work as an RA with the Department of Emergency Medicine to help enroll patients at so-and-so hospital, right? Study. And then they talk a little bit about some of the things that they do for this. They also talk about other kinds of programs they've participated in, right? Where they talk about their research experiences. And then here they say in the last one, what they were able to get out of these previous experiences and really highlighting that they have some passion and enthusiasm. So they name drop some people who probably will be their letter writers. And so this is a really nice one because it actually tells a story, pulls you in, talks about their experience, and then also why they want to do this program as well. Some of the applications that we have in the cover letters may specifically name the faculty that they want to work with, the projects that they are applying for. And that's kind of exciting because then it helps that faculty mentor to really see as they they receive these packets, the students that really want to work with them. And so it's up to you if you want to take that more specific approach of name dropping some programs you're excited or some faculty that you're excited to work with, versus if you just want to keep it a little bit more open and general. And so that's really up to you. So I wanted to just pause to see, as you're looking at this, if you have any questions that's coming up about this statement. We'll look at a couple more as well, but questions that's coming up for you that you're noticing.
I have a quick question. If we don't have any past research experience, how do you suggest that we go about incorporating our passion for research into the personal statement?
Oh, I love that. That's a great comment because actually one of our undergraduate researchers who actually was able to get a SPUR had no experience in a lab or research team, and they were successfully selected for a competitive program like this. And so some of the things you may want to highlight is your experiences of working in teams. So have you volunteered for other things, or do you have work experience that shows that you are team oriented or that you're able to get things done? If you have any kind of classes you've taken that shows you have those fundamental skills. Some of the projects, for example, if you are going to be working with a team that may require some basic, coding skills and all of that, and you have those skills, you may want to drop that, put that out there that you have developed those skills, and all of that, and that you're really excited. If you've had any training that you think would be useful for them to know, generally. But some of the things you should know is that our faculty have been informed that it is their job to train you into the role. So we don't expect you to be able to come in fully knowing how to do the research that you are applying to be a part of. You will be trained when you enter it. So the question is what do you think they will be looking for? What are the fundamental skills do you think they are looking for that you have, right? And so you can talk about any work experience, volunteer experience. If you have leadership experience that you have with running student groups, any of that, all of that matters. I hope that answers your question. Does that help to answer that question?
Yes, that helped a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Would you all like to look at another one, or is there any questions before we go on to the next
I had
one?
another question about whether you would encourage or discourage the use of AI just through like editing essays or helping you brainstorm ideas.
I think that one of the things is that AI cannot speak to your life experience. AI doesn't know your life. And so one of the things is while students may use it, which I think is common to kind of help edit a thing, edit their application materials, you really do need to clean it up and all of that because AI doesn't know who you are. It can't speak in your voice. It can't. And I think that, when students are writing these personal statements, you may be thinking, who do you want them to hear me sound like? That shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be, what is my authentic voice and how do I tell them who I am? So they genuinely learn that I'm a person who's persevered. So one of the things that Ali talked about was perseverance. Well, that looks different for each person in a personal statement. Some may talk about some of these kind of things that you have overcome that have been like, life transforming, right? Some of the kinds of things range, right, from health to, please don't all talk about COVID-19 because the whole world came through that, right? That won't be quite super unique unless if there's something you can really speak to that is, super interesting that shows your ability to persist relating to research, right? So that's what I would, encourage you to share. I think that here, I'm going to just look at the chat. So, okay, so that's totally fine. So my interest is oriented towards physics, but I seem are moving towards the web pages now. So so if you're interested in physics, one of the things is that you might want to look at our offerings, but NSF also has application portal for NSF REU. So I'm going to put this in the chat for everyone to read. It's called NSF REU. If you look into that, you'll find that actually generally, and actually we do have a physics project with Jordan Gearton, who's in physics. If you're interested in applying to work with him, that would be highly encouraged that you consider that if you're interested in physics. So I'm going to look at this, have you all look at this next example where here again, a nice opening, right? Growing up, I was raised by my mother, who was very educated, diligent, and independent woman. My mother pursued education in the arts for her entire life and has taught, organized, and worked in higher education for over two decades. She taught me the determination, organization, and patience necessary not just for school, but life as well. And so here, this person in this first few sentences, they're already highlighting here, right? Because research is slow. Research takes time. Research is difficult, can be at times, right? So patience is a huge skill, right? And so here, I think this is really an interesting way to open, right? And they talk about, due to her influence, I draw a thick line between life and education, as I believe they sing a beautiful duet. However, regardless of my excellent professors, mentors, and friends, right, I still found myself hitting a roadblock. What is my purpose? I knew anything can be accomplished with my mother's example, but what do I truly enjoy, right? And so here they're pulling us in, right? Oh, I'm starting to find it, right? Nurse to biology to then I found biomedical research, right? This is what they want to do. So really cool opening. They talk about some of their experiences here. And so you're seeing no one, AI cannot talk about your experiences. Only you can talk about what are the tasks, the fundamental skills, the things that you have experienced, whether it is, whether it is in a class lab to a actual, because you're part of a research team or those independent projects that you've worked on, right? And so those are the things that no one can teach you. You have to pull your story in, and that's what I hope you all really get out of this, is that the personal statement is called personal for a reason. It is your statement speaking to who you are, and nobody can write that but you. And so what I would really encourage is that you write through it and you have lots of people read it. Share it with your current faculty mentors who might be writing letters of recommendation. Have your peers look at it and say, does this tell the story? And the three things that you really, if you can take anything away, is it needs to pull in those characteristics about that you bring to research. It also needs to talk about your skills, and it also needs to talk about, and here they talk about their goals, right? Your goal, this person's goal here, last paragraph, is to enter a PhD program for neuroscience. So then that way that faculty mentor can start to think, do I have the skills to get that person where they need to go with their goals? And so there is, in that sense, I would say that there isn't a template, right? This is your personal statement, and we have a word maximum on the website that you might want to kind of stick to, right? If you go to the website. And so here, let's read the question. So a person says, hello, Megan. And so my application is at a point where it's currently under the character count, but over the recommended word count. Would you recommend that I cut it down? I think it should be okay. We're actually, this is a ballpark with our word count. We actually kind of allow it to go a little bit over because we know that sometimes students need a little more wiggle room. So as long as it allows you to insert the words, you should be fine. So I wouldn't overthink it, Megan. We give this kind of word count that you kind of want and to aim for, or the character limits too sometimes, is because what we're saying is we don't want you to like puke out your whole life story of pages and pages. This needs to be something that is about a page that the faculty are going to read, right? Because as you recall that in the personal statements, right, as you can imagine, is that as Angie pointed out, we receive hundreds of applications, and these faculty are going to be reading it too. So some of the things I just want to highlight about that's working with this example is that it's easy to read. It's not filled with jargon. It pulls you in, and that's something you want to think about, is easy to read, not filled with jargon, right? But gets at your fundamental skills that they will understand. Because, one of the things is you don't want it to feel slow, because if they can't get through it very quickly, they just may not even finish reading your personal statement. So that would be my real, like, big recommendation, is what makes this really strong. I guess I want to open it up. What else makes this kind of work that you're seeing that's kind of interesting? So to you, what are the things folks want to highlight here that you think this is an interesting example?
Hey, thank you for inviting us to talk about this. I feel like this person does a really good job with kind of a more story narrative in their personal statement. And also, they start with talking about their mom and her and how she's experienced, and they end with talking about her mom. And so I feel like it really frames the paper nicely.
That is wonderful, right? That's a really good point. It bookends it, right? So it's not like I introduce something and then I forget about it, which actually is generally strong strategy for writing. And so one of the things that our faculty mentors are going to be looking for, because you could be co-authoring with them. So they're going to be looking for somebody who has strong writing skills potentially, right? Or maybe you're doing data collection, right? And so maybe the agreement isn't, it won't be co-authorship, but they're going to need somebody who's really good at like the details, right? So maybe you're somebody who's really good at being detail oriented, right? So those are the things you kind of want to tell the story about, right? And share it. And I love that this person is talking about inspiration for them, because it also really speaks to the kind of the humanness of them. This is a person behind this personal statement, right? So are there other comments or questions that folks want to share? That's like, what else is working for this?
Hi. I also noticed another thing I really liked was how this person kind of noted where they had some faults, but not only that, kind of how they overcame that, which I think is also very important because you can always struggle, but that's not the important part. The important part is how you get through that struggle and make yourself better. So I really like that.
Yes, right. Because that's the persistence. That is what they're going to be looking for, right? Is persistence. Another thing that so how do you come through? You're right? We don't want to just talk about our challenges, but how we come through it. Another thing that I think that is coming through that I think is really interesting, right? Is like, so you have those kinds of characteristics. Another thing that faculty tend to like is how curious are you? Do you ask questions? So one of the things that I though see sometimes happening that students make the writing mistake is they use the word like overuse words, or they might ask too many questions in their personal statement, but they don't answer it. And one of the things that you should know about good writing is that good writing will ask a question and answer it. Right? It doesn't just leave us hanging in wonder. And so you should ask, if you ask a question, what is my purpose? Then it should actually have it answered. By the end of it, we actually start to see what their purpose is, right? PhD program for neuroscience. The other thing is that this person, what makes this a strong writing is that one thing I would say is that is kind of something they should have considered is you don't want to have sentences start with the same word, my and I. It becomes repetitive writing over and over again. So one of the things I would have recommended is like one more read through for this writer is they might have just kind of cleaned up the my and I. So the voice kind of doesn't feel repetitious, my and I over and over again. It is your personal statement, but you kind of don't want the reader getting locked into that my and I voice. And so work through the sentence structure to kind of clean out so it's not repetitious of too many I's and too many my's. So that would actually be my kind of suggestion for this writer is I would say too much my and I, go through and clean that up. And I would make recommendations of how you kind of can cut out the my and I in the writing. But it generally is a really strong personal statement. All right, let's go to the next one. So let's look at another one here, right? Okay, so here it says, during the COVID-19 pandemic, like many others, I became very interested in viruses, getting to the punch, right? Like not making us wait for this, right? This is what I'm interested in, right? And they said, I spent a lot of time looking through papers and studies, but I wasn't a virologist and right? None of you are virologists. If you're already professionals, we would not be expecting any of you to apply for this, right? So, and many of the concept in this cutting edge research went over my head. I wanted to know more, but I didn't have even the foundational knowledge to know what I didn't know. This is really wonderful, right? Like they're setting up curiosity, right? The amateur research I attempted during the COVID-19 pandemic motivated me to resume my college education. While the pandemic left many feelings of powerless, I recognized that I could do something, right? I returned to school and with the goal of learning about life and how it can go wrong. In my second semester, I took an emergency medical technician course, and it was an incredible learning experience. In addition to a deeper appreciation of EMTs, I learned a lot about the human body and how to maintain the spark of life until the patient arrived at a hospital. So again, really good story, right? Like kind of opening. And again, no one can tell this story, your personal story of the things you're curious about, the things you're excited about, right? And so They didn't become an EMT, right? And here they're kind of continuing to narrate where they continued their education in biology and organic chemistry, right? And how these classes help them, and so forth, right? And so then their decision to apply to SPUR is driven by their interest, right, in research in the fields of biochemistry and cellular biology. And again, their long-term goals. So again, you're seeing very similar, right? Like here are the things, right? Like these are the things that I built my skills, right? And again, this person isn't talking about like, I was in this intensive lab, right? They're talking about the things that they did, skills wise, professional wise, to build their skill, to make them an intriguing candidate for the opportunity with the faculty mentor. So really interesting, right? Kind of a different way to approach this. We also have different fields, right? So we have from humanities to the social sciences. So there's a range of projects that students can apply for with our university. And so just keep that in mind. There's whole range, and don't feel like if you're somebody who's not interested in medicine or STEMmy fields that the doors are closed. We have many opportunities that you should check out on the website. So are there other things folks are noticing with this as an example, or that you want to highlight that you appreciate about this one?
I have a question.
Go
before-
ahead. Yeah.
I know that the previous examples and this one they all want to pursue a PhD, but is it okay if we write in our personal statement that we're still kind of unsure, but we want to explore and figure out if that's the path we want to take? Or would that be more harmful to the personal statement because there's kind of like this uncertainty?
Yeah. So, I think that there's no requirement that says you plan to pursue a PhD or MD in a program, right? You could even say, like, I guess the question becomes, what are you interested in doing then? Do you want to share that? Maybe we can think about how would you frame that?
Oh yeah, so I was asking more because right now I am pre-MD, but I am trying to like explore the MD PhD pathway.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah.
But
So I
yeah,
would phrase it just as the way you phrased it, is that you were
okay.
exploring the PhD, MD programs, right?
Okay.
I would be authentic. You're not trying to be something you're not, right? And for
Yeah.
those of you that are unsure and you're like, I don't even know if I want to go into a PhD or MD program or JD program, right? Maybe you're interested in getting a master's degree. Maybe you're interested in going into workforce, right? There is no requirement in these undergraduate research programs that say you must be pursuing a higher ed advanced degree. What they're looking for is people to be part of their teams, right? That are interested in what they are doing, right? And so I would just encourage that when you apply for an opportunity, that you authentically speak to what it is that you are genuinely interested in doing.
Thank you so
And yeah, and no AI can write that, folks. And maybe you're like, I don't know, today I'm interested in this, tomorrow I'm going to change my mind, right? Well, why don't you write it with the today voice, knowing that tomorrow it will probably change, because everyone who's in their careers have pivoted at some point, right? Other questions come, those are great questions about the personal statement. Other questions coming up for folks about statement. Anything else coming up for folks? Do we want to look at a previous statement one more time? Are folks interested in that? So we can go back to the previous one. I don't have any other new ones. I think we only decided to do the three. So let's just revisit this first one because I didn't open it up, right, for you all. So here, actually, you can see that they're starting to use jargon here, right? NKX2-1, right? PCR, right? That is jargon, right? Here that this person, MAPK pathway. So actually for this person, they are choosing to use some jargon to speak to the person on the other end. So when you use jargon, you'll have to make decisions of how much you use. SPSS, right? Qualitative Data Analysis Platform, right? So up to you how much you want to use. So it doesn't mean don't use any jargon in your personal statement. You are welcome to use it. Just keep in mind that who you're applying to do research with may not use the same jargon as you, right? And so that's just something to keep in mind. So I guess one of the things I would suggest for you all, so as you are working on your application materials, what I would recommend that you might want to start, what you might want to do is kind of think about how many, can I just get a raise of hands maybe? How many of you have already started to draft your personal statements? We've got 1, 2, 3. So a few of you. Okay. I would love to hear from you all who started to draft your personal statements. How did you start? What did you do?
If you don't mind that I speak again, so
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I think just because this is such an important application for all of us, it can be really stressful to start. And so it's easy to procrastinate just because it is so important to all of us. And so I
Mhm.
think for me to start, what I had to do was understand that a first draft is a first draft for a reason, and that it's not my final statement, and it's not a reflection of who I am as a writer or a researcher. It's just to get started. So for me, I just had to start and get a first draft out there so that I could keep working on it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a wonderful insights. And I think that one of the things, if you find that getting started is really hard, is I find that sometimes to help get somebody started, maybe is outline. So what are the kind of things you just want to have appear in there? And so you're just not sure. So maybe just start with an outline. What are the things you want it to look like or have in there? Another way is sometimes, and I do this as a trick to myself, I'm a scholar who writes quite a bit, is sometimes I'll take notes of my ideas and I'll just throw it into the page because I think that seeing a blank page is probably the most daunting things, right? Is when you open up and you just see a white blank page. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take my notes and I'll put it in the Word document and then I'll start from there, or sometimes I'll start anew, right? And it just helps me to kind of think through, okay, these are the ideas. I'm not totally starting from scratch. And maybe some of those notes get deleted. I also find that sometimes one of the things is that we work so hard on our words that we are very attached to them. So sometimes what helps is that if I'm not sure if I want to say this thing, I create a section called notes for later at the bottom of my page. So then I start putting notes in for later because maybe I want to say that. Maybe I don't, but it's because it's only going to be a page, right? Single space. So really not a lot of real estate, folks, to say a lot. And so those would be my recommendations for getting started and getting through the writing. I also would highly recommend that all of you have folks read your personal statements, reach out to folks, get the feedback that you can, and and don't personalize the feedback, right? It doesn't mean, as Megan pointed out, it's not a statement or anything about your writing. It is feedback to ensure that you communicate the best that you can communicate, right? And so that would be my recommendation for getting started and getting through the personal statement. I do think that it is a story. It should have an opening and a closing, right? And so those are the things is how do you want to open and how do you want to close? And that's why when our colleague pointed out the kind of like the through line of the mother in the beginning and the mother in the end is important because you're bookending and that's common strategy for writing. And so I would recommend that you think about those kinds of things that you want to have in your writing. And also I think that think about topic sentences, right? And think about like really like, maybe your outline can just start with like, these are the things that each paragraph you might want to say, right? Each paragraph, I want to talk about this thing. And here I want to talk about this thing, but does it flow? What do I need to go back to make it flow? One of the things that I find that oftentimes, and again, I cannot emphasize this enough, is that this personal statement should be your voice. We want to hear from you. We want to know who you are. And so some of the things you might want to do is write through it, but read it out loud. Read it out loud and see, does it flow? So some of the ones that we are reading, you could see maybe it could have had one more read through where it could have been polished just a little bit, right? Just a little bit cleanup. And so I would recommend you read it out loud. And does it have a nice flow, or do you feel like you're tripping over your words, or the sentences don't quite flow? So there needs to be a little bit more something happening in between. You make a note, you go back, you fill it in, right? But really be authentic, but also be really clear and honest with yourself. Is this doing the work that it needs to do to tell the story I needed to tell about my research experience? Anything
I
else
have a
coming?
quick question.
Yes, please ask questions. That's why we're here.
So would you say that the personal statement, like if you have a project that you really want to do, like do you think it'd be beneficial to talk a lot about that project and like how you specifically, like what you would give to that project?
Yeah, so that can work for you and against you. So I think that it works well in certain fields because how do I say this nicely? Professors want to be wanted. They want sometimes the student to want their work, and that's the match, right? So if you speak specifics about that project, you may be ruling out the other ones that you are in contention for. So what I would recommend is you not then, if you speak about one and because remember you are picking up to 3, right, for our university opportunity, you kind of don't want to dismiss the other ones that you're considering. And you might want to also have in there that your openness to other projects, because you might think you want to do, say, work with this one project, but you don't know, the door might have opened with this other one if you kept it a little bit more. Does that make sense? I hope that answers that question. But I've seen it kind of go in both ways, where it's like when a student speaks directly about a specific professor's project, sometimes it is a clear match, but you have a 1 in 600, you know what I mean? Like the odds are, because everyone's being considered, right? And so it's a risk, but maybe it might be a risk worth taking. So it is up to you. And I can't tell you whether it's right or wrong, because some professors really want the student to want their work. And if they don't see that in the research statement, they may be like, well, I'm not going to consider that. And certain fields are more, there's a lot more of that kind of clarity around the kind of mutual preferences. I hope I'm making sense. Am I making sense, folks?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions coming up about personal statements. These are great questions. There's no question that is too big or too small. I've seen all kinds of personal statements, right? And so what other things coming up for folks that you want to chat about? I think those examples that are shared were really nice because they didn't name specific projects, but we've seen some very successful projects where they really do name the professor they want to work with, and they talk about like, why this thing, right? So we've seen it work both ways.
If I could ask a little bit about what the process is like with our personal statement, does it go through a review team first before it gets to our projects we've selected, or do our personal statements go straight to the 3 projects that we're hoping to get into?
It does all of it. So what happens is there is a committee who receives applications. If we're noticing that it is not in alignment, or if you're missing something, right, from your application packet, there's a little bit of a window, especially if you're applying in advance, where Angie will then reach out and say, hey, you're missing X, Y, or Z, right? And she'll kind of send those nudges, right? Some of you've probably received it if you started the application, right? And then you'll have some time to fix or rework things, right? But as we get closer to deadline, the time is there's just not enough time. Then what happens then is your packets then are pulled, and when they're complete, then they go on to the faculty to then review all the applications that have selected them. The faculty then kick it back to the committee and make their recommended selections, and then the committee reviews. The committee then reviews and makes final determinations of which students to select. And sometimes you will find is that is a wait period, maybe a little bit, because maybe you are part of a top 3, but maybe you're not number 1, and you shouldn't be hurt if that happens, because sometimes actually you still may be selected. So some of the things you should know is, if you haven't heard from the office right away around the time we say we're going to get back to you, you should never consider yourself out of the running. You should only consider yourself out of the running when you receive the rejection letter. Until then, will be in contention. And those faculty will be reading those personal statements. They'll be reading the personal statements. And if they have other committees within so each department and projects have different committees and all of that subcommittees. So they may have other folks who may be also reviewing the applications and helping them to determine it, especially if their projects are team-based. So yeah, so that's kind of how that process works. But folks will be reading your personal statements, and those you apply for will be reading your personal statement. They will be seeing it. If they have hundreds of folks who are selecting them, they will be reading it more quickly. And so one of the things that you should keep in mind is, how quickly can they know you and read through it? So the more clunkier your writing is, the more likely they are not to get through. And I cannot express this enough, then the more likely they are not to consider your project, right? Your application. And so you really want to have the ease of read, but then also highlight the experiences that will speak to them, right? So applying to do research with a professor in chemistry or biology, Very different than applying to do research with a faculty who's in city and planning, right? And doing interviews. Very different skills. And so the city and planning, they may want somebody who's more likely to be comfortable with talking and interviewing people, right? So you might highlight different skills that you bring to the table than say if you're doing coding or if you're doing, you're working in a lab and you have experience working with pipette, right? So yeah.
Hello. I have a
Hello.
quick question. I
Mhm.
was in the other break room. I didn't have the opportunity to see the example. Is there any way that we can have maybe like the feedback of this meeting?
Yeah, so let's just go back to them. And I'm going to just show again some of the examples again here. So we are going to share. We will not share this. We will not post this. And so this is, it's either you see it here or you don't. And so one of the things that we shared is that examples, so I'll just kind of give the quick rundown of it, is that some of the things that you want to make sure your personal statement has is it has a good story, has a good way that it draws in the reader into your story, right? If you are not a creative writer or you don't feel comfortable writing like this person is, right? Like sitting in silence, I ask myself if I had made the right decision, right? Here they are really storing themselves. You should write in your authentic voice. And so that is what is highly recommended. We want to know you, your experiences, your life experiences that no AI can generate, only you can talk about. And so really you need to bring in that story. You also want to highlight any experiences you have had, whether it's research, work, volunteer. All of those skills matter, classes, courses, especially if it matters for particular research teams or projects. So it's highly encouraged that you kind of look at the ones you're interested in and bring in the skills that you have that they might find intriguing and important. The other thing is good writing. It tells a story, it brings in. So one of your colleagues highlighted here, this person actually talked about how they're growing up. I was raised by my mother. So they're really highlighting some of the things that their mother, the skills their mother gave them, and the skills that they're bringing to the table that is then leading them to their career aspirations. So this person's doing that really wonderful work. And that's actually something all of your personal statements should really highlight is what are your career goals? Like, what is next? How will this help you get there, right? And don't just say I want to go into medicine and this and in order to get into medicine, I need to do research. That's a fact, right? There is no there is no question that if you want to get into medical school, that you need to have some research experience. So talk about though, like why this experience, right? That's more intriguing, right? Why this experience and why medicine? Why are you interested in medicine? That's a different story, right? So this person talks about their mother in the opening and then also bookends by pulling in the story later on. So that's kind of some of the skills that they're highlighting here and pulling us into their writing, pulling us into their story. Who you are matters. And so that's one thing that I cannot emphasize enough is that who you are really matters. And we want to hear who you are, your voice, writing in your voice. Have lots of people read it so that repetitious words like my and I can be cleaned out. Read it out loud to ensure that the clunkiness of the writing is cleared out. So does it flow? Yeah. So that's just a really quick recap. Did I miss anything, folks? Did anybody want to make
Thank
in
you so
a
much.
So
great?
I have my personal statement almost complete.
Good.
I just wanted to come here, absorb things what you're saying. And all
Mm-hmm.
you said, like, it was really helpful for me, and it gave me like quite a few ideas on how
Mm-hmm.
to work on it and how to like further uh
Mm-hmm.
make some changes, and it was helpful. I would say so.
Good.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Good, good. Yeah. And again, you can drop into the Funding Fridays or make an appointment with a member of my team if you want additional feedback. They're willing to do that.
Actually, this is pretty interesting. I have worked kind of cover letters before. It's kind of a
Mhm.
similar format, but personal statements are just different oriented. Um, as somebody who doesn't have a research background, because I was doing programming before and I just decided to switch to biochem,
Mhm.
um, which kind of experiences do you think are valuable to include in the personal statement?
I think you should talk about your previous programming experience. You don't know what they're going to see as an added value, right? That you bring to the table of somebody who's been able to work and build skills in different environments, right? So don't devalue the kind of previous experience you have. I think faculty know that our students change directions all the time, right? I mean, the research shows that we just know you're changing your majors like 5 times at least, right? Totally normal. So don't think of that as like an exception. That is normal. And so, but you might want to talk about it, especially if you're interested in applying for opportunities with STEM teams, because they may be looking for somebody who can bring in those, cross engineering to biology, science, right? Like that is actually interesting, right? That you bring in that perspective. So see it as a strength, right? And then I would highlight that strength. And then also talk about then why this new direction, because a lot of students who do engineering actually go into medicine, science related fields, or sometimes they go into industry, whatever, right? So many directions you can go. So pull that in and see it as a strength. And then just know if you've had experience working in teams, they love seeing that. So then talk about that, right? And then talk about like, what did you do in those teams? If you've done writing in teams, talk about that. They love that, right? And all of that. Yeah. Other things coming up for folks. How are you doing? I mean, are folks, what are you feeling? Is there what like an anxiety, scared, excited? How are you feeling?
Exciting.
Yeah, isn't it? Right? You're putting, one of the things is you can't be considered if you don't try. So what is the worst that can happen? Just try, put your name out there, apply, you will be considered. All of you will be considered, right? And actually, you're highly encouraged to apply for multiple summer opportunities. Don't just apply for this one, apply for multiple, because if you get into multiple, you can only do one because you can only be in one place at one time, right? But then you have choice. But if you get into one, hey, great, right? That's wonderful, right? And so I would highly encourage you to use this as an opportunity to think about applying for multiple, but really don't rule out University of Utah. We have really cool stuff happening here, and as Ali really highlighted, lots of programming that's just for students and really strong research communities. And if you're University of Utah student, and if you apply and you don't get into any, you should also know that there's other opportunities to apply for Europe and still be part of the undergraduate research environment, even if you don't get the SPUR. So you should check in with my team of, if I don't get it, what do I do then, right? So I would, for the U of U students, for sure. Yeah.
I joined a bit later, so I wasn't here to see everything that you had talked about previously, but I was curious if you would look at people's personal statements individually, or if someone would, to be able to give very intimate feedback.
Yeah, so we can look at it. You can make an appointment with one of our team members or you can drop into Funding Fridays. That's another place. If you have that now, we could use this time now if you wanted to share it. I think we could have you share if you wanted, if you were willing to be vulnerable. But some of the highlights that I would highly recommend is it should tell your story. No one can tell your life story except for you. It should have an opening that pulls you in. It should have a closing that tells us where you're headed to, right? What's next for you? In between should talk about your skills, right? And that you should have lots of folks read it. So you should share it with us. You should make an appointment with members of our team. You should also definitely have your mentors read it, your faculty read it, because the more eyes on it, the stronger. And I know that somebody earlier on said that English is not their preferred language. You know what? Even English preferred folks find that writing in English is hard. Okay, so for those of us who've grown up in the US, writing in English is not easy. It's a weird language, okay? It has all kinds of rules, and we're always messing it up, whether English is your first language or not, right? So you should always, whether English is your preferred language or not, have others look at it, including writing statements, because writing is not natural, and none of us came out of the womb knowing how to write. So you have to get feedback on your writing. So that's what I would highly encourage. If you want to chat me directly, I'm happy to look at it right now quickly. But after this time is over, I know I personally will not be receiving examples. I won't have time. Did anybody else want me to do that for them as well? And you should know that I'm going to read it as most professors do, which is very quickly with a sharp eye that's just going to be looking for, do I see the punchlines and what I need to see very quickly? And if I don't, that's what is a feedback. I'm not going to get into the details of your experience because that will vary depending on the type of project. And really, did you want me to share this with others or you want me to keep this private?
Yeah, you can share it with others.
So I'm going to go in a share screen. Is that okay?
Yes, that's totally fine.
Okay, we have your verbal permission. We're going to go ahead and do that. So here, for as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the human psyche through its complex capabilities, the presence of consciousness, and the behaviors that we present as a result of our mind, context, and environment. This intense interest has led me to explore the many different possible paths that I could take with psychology. I love it, Ridley. This is great. You're talking about your interest in the mind, right? Right. This intense interest has led me to explore that many different possible paths I could take in keeping in mind my strong desire to understand how things work, why they work in an and so here's where it gets a little clunky. So I would actually be more specific, right? And that's what I would recommend here. Because right now you don't want to get lost in too much abstraction. You want to pull it into specifically what about the mind intrigues you, right? Because of this introspection, I've come to the realization over the past 6 or so months that I would prefer to do research as a social worker, right? Oh, that's cool. We have some social work projects, so that's very exciting. Okay, great. But you should know that not all social work fields do a lot with the mind. Sometimes they're macro, so societal, right? And so not all social work is about the clinical practice. And so I think that's just something really to keep in mind for that. But this is super cool. So you're talking about, I would break this up into different paragraphs because right now it's just one big paragraph. So, and then I'm just going to read through here. Here you talk about your certifications. That's great. And here you're highlighting some of your interest in projects. So one thing I would read through again, get rid of the my and the I. The I is very repetitious, and I would really I would encourage you to rework your sentences so it's not so repetitious with that. I would also suggest organizationally, because here you're talking about courses, is that you might want to organize it so that there's organization where when you talk about training, that it's in one section, or it's organized in a way. And when you talk about research experiences, organized in a specific way, and all of that. I think one of the things is it doesn't, I would recommend also, because you're talking about your interest in the mind, I would love to see you kind of coming back to that again, because we start with that, but we don't really, and generally saying you're hoping to have a career in that, but it doesn't pull us back into like the mind and the brain, which seems to be your intrigue in this. So that would be my recommendation for this. Does anyone else have suggestions or things that are coming up as you read this? I think it's a very strong start though.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the I being repetitive, it's a personal statement, so we're talking about us. How
Mm.
can we make the focus like we're talking about us, but we don't want to be repetitive in it?
Mhm.
What would you recommend us?
Yeah, so my recommendation is that you want to use a variety of words. The reason why is that you don't want the reader to see repetition. So one of the things that I've done is, I remember when I was an earlier writer, I used to always say conceptualize all the time. I'd say it over and over, like every time, right? And so I would recommend is if you know there's words that you generally repeat all the time, you go through and you do keyword search for it and you see how many times does it pop up. You don't want to have repetition of words because then it doesn't show diversity of verb or adjective use, right? And you don't want it to be repetitious for the reader. And so that you can do afterwards. So I would start with, so that's a strong draft that really shared with us that I think is very strong. Then I would go through and then try to diversify and where you can shed out the repetitious words. I do think that breaking things up in paragraphs is important because it helps give the reader some reprieve. So they see this is this, they can quickly read through things, see, oh, this paragraph's about their experience. This paragraph's about their goals. This paragraph, you know what I mean? So you kind of want to break things up. So organizationally, somebody can flow through the research statement and see what they need to know about you very quickly. Because as you saw how I was reading it, some of those reviewers are going to read it even faster, right? They're just going to quickly scan through it. Ridley, how do you feel about that feedback?
I really appreciate it, and I feel like I have things to work on because I feel like that's where I've been stuck, just not knowing what
Yeah.
else to do with it. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So then question is, do you have any red flags or turnoffs in personal statements? Oh, you all want to be doctors. Every single one of you wants to be a doctor. That's the one thing. So I would recommend why. Why do you want to be a doctor is a more important question. Not, or I want a PhD. Of course, you all want to get advanced degrees. You're all very competitive. But why, right? So what is the personal drive, which only you can tell that story of? Like, was there an intrigue or a life experience or something that drew you there? I see Preston has shared something for me to look at. Preston, are you willing to share this with the large group, or do you want it just as private feedback?
It's fine, whatever.
Okay. Can you say a strong yes? We're
Strong yes.
okay, great. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and again, I just think you all are so brave coming into this, to share your writing. And you should know that my drafts, I've had some pretty bad first drafts. I'm seeing some very strong drafts, so you should all know that we don't all start with a strong draft. I think this is it. Share. Whether through research, policy, or practical contributions, the ability to participate in often slow but crucial work has always been a driving force for what I involve myself in. This broad desire has led to some uncertainty in my path, as fields of chemistry, engineering, and social studies each offer significant opportunities to make an impact. However, as I've become more involved I'm going to make this bigger so you can all see it, community work, witnessing the effects of the housing crisis, institutional failures, and structural discrimination, I've increasingly leaned toward public health advocacy. This is great. You all are such strong writers. So I love that you're kind of telling us there's a problem and I'm really interested in solving it. So that's what makes this a strong opening. I also minor, get rid of contractions because this is still formal writing. So while you are personally talking about your person, you want to get rid of the contractions. So you show this is formal writing. So I have, right? And that. So by participating in the SPUR program at the University of Utah, I hope to learn more about drug development and pharmaceutics while contributing meaningfully to this program's accelerated environment, right? So great. So here you're talking about goals. Here you're talking about your volunteer experience, connected pregnant individuals, experience substance use disorders, have, I would say, shed light on the structural inequities that drive health disparities. I think here you could actually slow it down and story it a bit more because right now it's coming across as just like these are the facts of things. I think you could do a little bit more storying here. That would be my recommendation. Then you're talking about other research experience. I think this is great. CVRTI is a great program. And you're talking about specific skills. Yeah, so I think this is great. So I would suggest though, because in the beginning, you started off with opening with problems you want to solve. I would actually bookend it and then return to the problems you hope to solve by doing this research, right? The other thing that I would recommend with yours is maybe just a little bit, Preston, a little bit more storing so we can see the person, the people that you have connected with in the because it seems so human connection based. So really bring that element into it. This is your statement. Last August, I moved from India to the United States to begin my college journey. I was excited about this new chapter, seeing my entire 17 and a half years of life crammed into 3 suitcases and a backpack was overwhelming. However, I held on to my big dreams. In college, a collaborative environment that my high school lacked and Bloom's taxonomy approach towards learning biological concepts inspired the research in me who wants to unravel the mechanisms of cells at the molecular level. So you might want to, I'd help, you might want to just have somebody read through this one more time, right? I love that this opening, you're talking about your international experience because it shows, and people actually do love, so if those of you have studied abroad or been in other contexts, it shows resilience and somebody's ability to move across different environments and a different kind of like maturity, right? So I would recommend if you've traveled, if you've done global learning somewhere else, or you have global experiences, those are assets, right? And so I think this is great that you're bringing it in. I think where you could have a little bit transition is how do we go from you arriving here to your interest, right? And what your experience is. I think you could have a little bit more story that helps us get there, right? And so, so attending SPUR would be the first step forward in gaining research experience, working full-time in a lab, right? So, okay, yeah, so we know you're excited. I think you can really get to, I think at this point, we want to know more about your experience, right? So here, you talked about my curiosity inspired me. I've learned medical research, so I'm reading very quickly. Python start. So you've learned Python. That's great. Some folks are going to really love that, right? This is good because I think you just need a topic sentence here that tells us like, that you have developed skills that you think will really help you in this research environment, right? But here we're talking about you're again at your like biology classes, so you just need a topic sentence that pulls us in courses you've taken that you think will help your experience, right? And I think this is great that you're highlighting these folks. They're wonderful. So excited to see them here. I would highlight more specificity though. So maybe you can maybe shorten why this paragraph into here and talk more specifically about why these opportunities. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
And then I think that one of the things, because you open with your international experiences of coming from India, is I would actually pull us back into like, what is the asset of having international experience mean for you, right? Is that, and what does it bring is having, different perspectives to the team. You're excited to bring those different perspectives because you have more of a global experience, right, with life. I don't know, bring it in again as a bookend asset to your experience. Does that make sense?
That does make a lot of sense. That helps a lot.
I want to thank those who are willing to share. I love it when we look at your statements because we see where you're at, and then you got to see some of the other statements.
Maybe do have a question.
And ask your question.
So usually we try to emphasize our strengths in the personal statement. Will it be kind of recommendable to point out maybe a weakness that we had or a challenge that we had and that we did overcome?
So I think that one of your colleagues pointed out earlier when we were looking at one of these is that you can share a weakness, but one of the things you really want to do is you do want to tell that overcoming that, but really make it link back to then why that would help you with research environments. Because that's what they're going to be looking for is somebody who has the ability to persist and come through things. Some folks might be looking for that, but what is it that you do after that? And so what are the skills you got from that? And what have you learned, right? And so some of the things that I've seen folks make the mistake of is like, they'll say like, oh, if they're applying for a position in chemistry, for example, right, is they'll say, or I've even seen this because I've done interviews for the School of Medicine too, right? Is like what they'll do is like maybe they will talk about, oh, I hate chemistry. Chemistry is so hard. Yes, of course, right? Of course, different things are hard for folks, right? And that's not the intrigue. That is not the story. The story isn't that it was hard, that you had difficulties at it. The intrigue is what did you do about that, right? So what did you do so you could get through it? But one of the things that you kind of also need to remember is you don't have a lot of real estate. So you don't want to also just have them thinking about your negative qualities. You really do want to emphasize your strengths. So if you are talking about things that were challenges or things that are your limitations, you want to frame it as a strength. So I hope that makes sense, is because you don't have a lot of time in a single page to talk about your whole life story. And so you don't want to leave them with just an emphasis of negative things. You really want to position things as a positive, because they're going to be reading through a lot of this, and that's what they're going to remember about you.
How competitive is this program and has it been in the past?
So you missed our earlier presentation,
I
part of
did,
the
sorry.
presentation. Yeah, it's very competitive, like all summer programs like this. So last summer we had 600 students apply. We could only pick about 50, so we have about an 8% acceptance rate. If there's any other questions that come up for you, I really just say lots of eyes on it, really work on your writing. Really, I think that there is no software that can generate your life experience. We want to know who you are. And maybe if you're like, you know what, it's not been super exciting, but you know what, you're all very super exciting. You all have a cool story to tell. You're all very interesting. So we want to know more about that. So share about your experiences, whatever those experiences are, work related, volunteer related, research related, class related, so they can see the skills you bring to this opportunity. If it's highlighted in your resume, great, right? Then tell the personal statement is a place where you can say things that the resume can't say, right? It is an opportunity to tell your story. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of your applications. I do have the honor of checking it out. I might not be able to read them all because that's a lot, as you can imagine, with 600. I do get to read them as we get to the shorter list. So I hope that I have the chance to read your submissions as we get to the shorter list. And so super exciting. I'm glad you're interested in our program. If you have questions, Angie's a great resource. You can always directly contact her at angie.leiva@utah.edu, or you can just contact OUR at utah.edu and message to Angie, and she will get your communication. So I'll just put that easier email to remember. Please do connect with Angie if you have specific questions about the program. She's your person. The rest of the team can help out, but Angie really can direct you in the right direction. We really